Hi, and welcome to this presentation on learners with specific learning disabilities. Sometimes these students are referred to having SLD and sometimes LD, but either way, we mean the same thing. This is a heterogeneous group of individuals who typically have normal intelligence, and that's key to this disability. The cognitive levels are within the normal and average range, but these students fail to learn as easily and efficiently as their classmates and peers despite having the same opportunities to learn and receive an education. Okay, this is the largest category of children or students enrolled in special education. Nearly half of students with an IEP do have SLD. This is not to be confused with an intellectual disability. We're going to talk about that next week, but I just want to emphasize that a learning disability is not a generic term for a person with special education or a person with a disability. They do have specific criteria to meet in order to be eligible for special education as having a specific learning disability. Okay, but over the years there have been some problems with defining and finding eligibility for students with learning disabilities. But it is basically a state decision on how that's defined. Here you have the technical definition in IDEA, which a specific learning disability means a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or in using language, spoken or written, that may manifest itself in the imperfect ability to listen, think, speak, read, write, spell, or to do mathematical calculations, including conditions such as perceptual disabilities, brain injury, minimal brain dysfunction, dyslexia, and developmental aphasia. Okay? Learning disability does not include learning problems that are primarily the result of sensory issues such as vision and hearing, motor problems, or, like this says here, mental retardation. That is the old term for intellectual disability. Emotional disturbance, environment, cultural, or economic disadvantaged. So please note that this is the definition. You should learn it. You're going to have students with learning disabilities if you teach in general curriculum special education, and it is not the same thing as having an intellectual disability. What are some of the causes of learning disabilities? Well, there are a lot of different proposed causal factors, but I think overall it's believed that it is genetic or hereditary influence, possibly an acquired trauma, um, maybe some environmental possibilities of teratogens, possibly during pregnancy, but there is no consensus on the cause of a learning disability. Um, Number of characteristics you're going to find with students with learning disabilities, and this is kind of a long list here, but the differences manifest across a lot of different domains. So you really might, need to really just listen to the rest of this presentation. I'm going to try to break it down, but you can look at this list and see how diverse students with learning disabilities may actually be presenting in school. Overall here, I think that we have some processes that have been identified to cause, the difficulties a student may have with using or understanding language. Okay, they could be cognitive factors, visual and motor skills, metacognitive awareness, and linguistic factors. We're going to talk a little bit about each of these. All right, cognitive factors. That could include working memory. Phonological working memory refers to a process of receiving, analyzing, and processing of sound elements in language. So students may have difficulties with learning to read because of their phonological working memory, not able to sufficiently distinguish the differences in sounds of different letters within the working memory. Working memory has also been found to be related to writing ability. Okay, so The main components of writing is planning, translating, and reviewing. Okay, so these lower level tasks are going to put a lot of constraints on the working memory, filling it up. Therefore, students have difficulties getting ideas on paper and able to write them in an organized, coherent manner. Long-term memory is knowledge stored and filed away in the memory. It is critical for both reading and writing. Okay, students need to have a good grasp on vocabulary so that they can get meaning from text. They need to have an understanding and knowledge of topics so that they can generate ideas for writing. And for the revising process of writing, they need to be able to connect meaning related problems when the text is based on familiar topics. So needing to have good long-term memory, being able to access knowledge and having it filed away in the brain in an organized manner. Executive functioning is a frontal lobe function, and we talked about it a little bit in the ADHD presentation. But the decision-making process that happens after we receive information, we have to think about what it is, where the information's going, how to retrieve other information, and what is the best way to express that knowledge. So a lot of decisions that are being made there. So it does play a role in developing reading, writing connections. Students do learn to read and write through each other, so there is a connection there. You can read through this slide right here to get an idea about how executive function is going to contribute to the reading, writing connections. I do want to mention that you have this PowerPoint on Moodle, so you can always refer back to it as you review the topic. Now, visual spatial abilities do allow the student to perceive the location of an object in relation to other objects. And that's an important skill for academics, such as reading, math, handwriting, because a student must be able to recognize different symbols, perceive their direction, and know the difference between similar shapes and their relationship to each other. Okay, the ability to perceive the location of objects in relationship to other objects is a critical skill. Individuals who have difficulty with spatial relationships may seem unusually clumsy or accident prone. They may have difficulty reading or may refuse to read, or they may have poor handwriting. Researchers recently have focused on analyzing what children must learn and identifying the problems that children with learning disabilities have in mastering material. Now the metas, okay? There are 4 meta abilities that go on, and it's basically revolving around reflecting and thinking about learning, okay? So meta-linguistic ability, reflecting and thinking about language. Meta-pragmatic ability, reflecting upon and talking about how language is used. Metacognitive ability is thinking about thinking and reasoning. How to go about a task and complete it, and check and be able to check yourself. That's metacognitive. And then metacomprehension. Okay, using reading and writing to learn new materials. Okay, creating meaning from those tasks. All right, we also have linguistic factors that are going to weigh in on processing and using and understanding language. Okay, the phonological loop. So if you know that phonology and phonics is really a sound and letter connection, there is a process that goes on in a child's brain to the extent which the students are able to integrate seeing a letter, making a connection to the sound that comes from that letter, or hearing sounds and being able to make the connection of what letter would relate to that sound. Okay, that skill, being able to do it with automaticity, directly impacts fluency of reading and writing. And you can see here, it does involve working memory to make the links from the word forms to the sound that would be produced with the mouth. Integrating syntax, morphology, phonological awareness, and orthographic awareness. The appropriate instruction is based on the child's individual needs. Orthographic loop is also happening in working memory. So it links the word forms with the hands. So the sounds and being able to form that letter that's seen in the mind and putting it on paper. That could impact spelling. Okay. The written word is initially stored in the temporary representations while the learner analyzes the constituent letters and letter patterns and then relates the orthographic information to other aspects of language. Okay, phonological, morphological, and semantic knowledge. Once connections are forged and the word is encountered multiple times, a more permanent word-specific spelling may be stored in long-term memory. There's a video that you're going to watch next in this module that you will find interesting is related to the orthographic loop, all right, and dysgraphia. Visual motor skills require the ability to translate visual perception into motor functioning. It involves motor control, motor accuracy, coordination, and psychomotor speed. Handwriting performance is influenced by these factors. Now, technology can be used to support children's learning when they have visual or auditory perception difficulties. I'm sure you can think with experience how this might, how you could use technology for this. And then there are typical PE difficulties we mustn't forget. If students have difficulties with instructions or have poor body awareness, if they're distractible or have poor social skills, they're going to need support in PE. Okay, you're also going to have a case study to complete. It's frank out of the textbook. You're just going to need to answer the questions, the discussion question at the bottom. And I think you can get all this information out of the text. Particularly, you might want to look at page 162 of the text to make your determination. All right, I have another minute left here. I want to kind of talk about 3 terms you may have heard. School systems don't diagnose these specific disorders. It's going to be more of a clinical diagnosis, but dyslexia, dysgraphia, and dyscalculia would all be considered a learning disability. Not all learning disabilities equal dyslexia, but dyslexia is a learning disability. What is dysgraphia? It's being able to write letters automatically and spell, or not being able to write letters, not being able to spell, but being able to read. Okay, so someone with dysgraphia can read but has difficulty with writing and spelling. It's that orthographic loop. Okay, you saw the video on it. See if you can read this. Pause the screen and see if you can read it. This child needs technology in order to be able to communicate in writing. Okay, what does this say? Pause it and look, because the next slide is the written version. Okay, with the technology he can really communicate. Okay, dyslexia, that's the core deficit in that phonological loop we talked about earlier. So dyslexia impacts reading, from being able to make connections between letters and sounds, using executive function to be able to process sound letter connections. It is both a reading and writing disorder. Here is an example of someone with dyslexia trying to communicate in writing. It took 14 minutes to write this sentence. See if you can read it. Okay, and then lastly, because reading and arithmetic are similar in many ways, numbers and words stand for concepts, right? A child with language difficulty is likely to have difficulty learning to calculate. Okay, so the last thing you'll need to do is watch the Fat City video and answer the questions. Thank you for joining me and have a great day.